A last plea to leavers to think again. The referendum in 2016 was no suitable basis for so important a decision as to whether we leave or stay in Europe. To start with, it was set up by David Cameron with a maximum lack of intelligence or foresight. The failure to give voters a chance to say whether they wanted a hard or a soft Brexit was the foundation of all the subsequent confusions. The Leave campaign was, in any case, illegal because they spent more money than they were legally entitled to. On that basis alone, the referendum should be rerun. We still don't know where Aaron Banks got all the money from. Did Russia interfere in the election? We don't know. I'd be happy to have accepted a vote that was fair, but this wasn't. And what did they spend the money on? The thoroughly disreputable and scurrilous underhand methods of Cambridge Analytica. Psychologists were employed to comb through people's Facebook profiles without their permission, needless to say, to identify characters who were deemed to find it difficult to make up their minds. And then, just before the vote, they were bombarded with highly inflammatory material. I was one, hence my fury. 2 days before the election, I got a handbill through the letterbox saying that Turkey was about to join the EU and the UK would be flooded with Islamic terrorists. It was all lies. The Leave campaign was indeed characterised by lies that were whopping, even by the standards of politicians. The £350 million a week for the NHS on the side of the bus is the most notorious example. I don't mind being outvoted. I do mind being taken for a fool and cheated. Pretty much all the competent economic authorities in the world are telling us that Brexit will be a disaster and that for years millions of people will be unemployed as a result. Pooh! Experts, you say. Well, maybe they know more about it than you do. I've never met a Leave voter who's even heard of ISDS. Investor-state dispute settlement is part of the WTO rules. Under it, corporations can sue governments for perceived restraint of trade. Thus Mexico tried to ban fructose syrup because it was making their kids too fat, was sued by Cargill, lost the case, hardly surprising, as most of the board of judges had previously worked for multinational corporations, and had to pay millions of dollars in damages. Under ISDS, the NHS won't last 10 minutes. The first thing America will want in a trade deal is access to UK agricultural markets. American agribusinesses, with its huge federal subsidies, vast economies of scale, and rock-bottom environmental standards, will destroy British farming as we have known it, let alone the last remaining bees and butterflies killed off by pesticides. The foundation of our country's democracy has been the Westminster Parliament, but Johnson and Cummings want to neuter it. Why do you think they will not allow the people to have another vote, and are doing their best to stop Parliament having one either? The evidence is now compelling that a majority of the people now want to stay in Europe, although that is not perhaps the case in Parliament. But Parliament certainly does not want no deal. I've never met a Leaver who can tell me why the fact that we had a referendum in 2016 means we can't have another one in 2019 or 20. Oh, because we had one in 2016, they reply. Yes, but that was just what I was asking you. I was asking you why that means we can't have another one later. Because we had one in 2016, is the dutiful reply. If it were the other way round, and a Remain government was making us stay, even though the Leave vote was so close. You know very well Leavers would be clamouring for another vote, all in the name of democracy. It would be pitifully comic if it were not so tragic. Above all, the tragedy of Brexit means that the UK will play no significant part in the world's attempt to halt climate change. This is by far the biggest issue of our time. The scientists are warning us unanimously and most solemnly. 2 experts, I hear you say. What do they know about it? They're telling us if we don't take urgent and decisive action to do away with fossil fuels, whole countries will go underwater, much of the world's most fertile land will be flooded, including the Fens and East Anglia. Cambridge could be a seaside town by the end of the century, according to the Met Office. Millions will starve, there will be terrifying hurricanes and droughts, and hundreds of millions, yes, hundreds of millions of climate refugees, they say. How fortunate that the climate scientists don't know what they're talking about. My nan, who read an article in a tabloid newspaper, thinks it's all scaremongering. You'd have thought that the problem is so serious it would have been right at the top of any political agenda. But Johnson and Cummings have no interest, don't even mention it. The country is being run by a Prime Minister who was not elected by the people, but by 66% of the 160,000 ageing members of the Conservative Party, and by Cummings, who wasn't elected by anybody at all. Stand by for an economic catastrophe followed by a climate meltdown. Pooh, experts. My nan knows more about them than they do. Why won't they let us have a second, what would not be a second, but a first vote? The 2016 one was so flawed. Let us have a second referendum, which is fairly conducted, and if Leave wins again, we'll abide by the result.